Superman, the Christopher Reeve story, just wrapped up a limited theatrical run, and if you were sitting next to me in my screening, then you will definitely believe that a man can cry. Hello everybody, I'm Dan Murrell, and this is my review of the documentary Superman, the Christopher Reeve story. Before I jump into that though, I want to very quickly note that as I am recording this video early on Thursday morning, there is currently a major hurricane that is bearing quickly down on Florida, and specifically targeting Tallahassee, Florida, which if you know the channel, you can see my hat, you can see this helmet behind me. I went to Florida State University, which is located in Tallahassee. It was my home for 4 years. The city has a long history, including when I was there, of storms weakening or going around, but it looks like this is going to be a pretty major hurricane hitting the city directly. And so if you are in Tallahassee and watching this, first of all, if you can safely evacuate at this point, then please consider that, although I know it's pretty late in the game. So if you are there and you have not taken the proper precautions, please find a shelter near you. Please make sure that you are prepared for what looks to be a pretty nasty storm. And of course, I'll be thinking about everyone in Tallahassee, everyone else in Florida and other states that are going to be affected by this storm. If you are in Tallahassee or in the path of the storm, please make sure that you are staying updated and that you're getting the latest news from the local disaster preparedness teams and everybody else. Please make it through this safely. I'll be watching for the next couple days, very worried and very anxious and hoping for the best for everybody involved. Let's turn now to Superman, the Christopher Reeve story, which is a new documentary that made its debut early this year at the Sundance Film Festival. Shortly after that, it was picked up for distribution by DC Studios itself. This is the first time that DC Studios has distributed a documentary, and it played for 2 nights as a Fathom event, including last night, which was, or would have been, Christopher Reeve's, I believe, 72nd birthday. I had planned to see this movie last Saturday night and get you this review before its second night as the Fathom event, but I had some stuff going on with my old house. I just couldn't make it. So even though the movie doesn't have any theatrical dates planned currently, I think because DC Studios is behind it, you've got a really good shot at more dates being planned in the near future or having it being available to stream on Max in the very near future. So to put this movie in context for me and sort of the lens that I was viewing it through, because I think that's the same for every critic. Every critic sees movies through the life that they've lived and their own experiences. I'd like to talk a little bit about what Christopher Reeve meant to me, because I was born in 1983. He was playing Superman at the time. And when I was growing up, Superman was the first superhero, really anything that I could remember watching. Now, 1989's Batman was the movie that I dove super hard into as far as dressing up for Halloween and stuff. But before that even, I dressed up as Superman. And Christopher Reeve, at first for me, wasn't an actor playing Superman. He was Superman. And he stood for all of the things that Superman stood for. So for a long time, until I started understanding what movies were and what the movie business was and what an actor was, when I would see Christopher Reeve, I would see hope. I would see a hero. I would see somebody in this world who was looking out for you and who would always do the right thing and would always be there for you when you needed him. And as a kid, that's a very powerful thing. And even as you grow older, what that means to you never really goes away. There are still those feelings and those memories, those sense memories, that sort of building block DNA thing that sticks around. When I would draw Superman as a kid, I would draw Christopher Reeve. When I found out that I needed glasses when I was young, I actually wasn't that upset, because I said, well, that's okay, because I'll look like Clark Kent. I'll look like Superman when he's not a superhero. And it made me feel better about that. So that's sort of the context of how I was introduced to Christopher Reeve, and a large part of why I still feel very attached to his portrayal as Superman, because it meant so much to me when I was younger, and because those ideas still mean a lot to me. It's nice to think about a world where there's always somebody out there that is going to be looking out for you and doing good for humanity and will always do the right thing. That's a very comforting thing, even as you grow older and you realize that that's, kind of a naive idea. Well, Superman as a concept is in that way, but that doesn't make it less comforting or less important. It is ironic that Superman meant so much to me and so much to so many other people, and yet for Christopher Reeve, it was something that he had difficulty escaping from, because that is all that people inside the industry saw him as. And the documentary covers a little bit the fact that he had so much trouble escaping from that he would do other movies and that they wouldn't do well and nobody would believe him in any role other than Superman. And I think that that's kind of one of those really interesting, maybe almost kind of ironic things about Christopher Reeve's life, which is that he had this role that meant so much to so many people, and so many people looked up to him and saw him as a hero. And yet in many ways, it held him back from doing a lot of the things that he wanted to do. Of course, that whole process for him was interrupted by the accident that happened in the 90s where he fell off a horse and broke his neck and ended up quadriplegic. He had no feeling basically below the neck. He had to learn how to breathe all over again. And he then devoted the rest of his life to finding a way to not only help himself, but to help other people who were in wheelchairs, who had suffered from paralysis. And there was a lot of criticism of Christopher Reeve, and still is. I've seen it in the press. I saw it right here in some of the comments when I said I was going to review this documentary, that he was focused too much on a cure, and that he didn't acknowledge that there is also a part of advocacy that is about understanding and acknowledgement and saying there's nothing wrong with you, and we're going to help you live your life in the best way possible without trying to fix what's happened to you. And I understand where that's coming from. And this is not something that the documentary shies away from. It openly acknowledges that criticism. And it also shows that Dana Reeve, who was Christopher Reeve's wife, agreed with those criticisms, and that's why she began a branch of the Christopher Reeve Foundation, which is now the Christopher and Dana Reeve Foundation, that focused on today, on current treatment, on current care, on improving the lives of people that were suffering from paralysis. And not just a cure or a way to get out of the chair, as Christopher Reeve was focused on. And that's one of the things that I liked about this documentary is, yes, it does present Christopher Reeve as a heroic person, and I think that in a lot of ways he was a heroic person, but it also acknowledges his shortcomings. It does present him as heroic, but it doesn't pretend that he's perfect. So they talk about the fact that the foundation initially was a little too focused in one direction, and they also talk about his personal failings. His children are heavy participants in the film, and they say in a way that is not damning of their father that, he had his own things in his life that he was struggling with. He refused to marry the mother of his first children and not show what she thought was a commitment to their relationship. And when he left that relationship, his kids say, that caused some actual distance. They weren't particularly close with their father early in their life. But I think what the documentary also shows is that the accident that Christopher Reeve had completely recontextualized his life. And he understood some things that he didn't understand before, and it drew him closer to his family in ways that they weren't close before. Christopher Reeve's accident in many ways led him to insights and taught him some lessons that he never would have known had that accident not happened. And I like that about the documentary. It actually doesn't focus too heavy on his career and his life before. It is a lot about his life after, and what he learned and what his struggles were, his moments of weakness and also his moments of strength, the process of this entire last part of his life. Christopher Reeve was not somebody who withered away. He's not somebody who gave up. He is somebody who fought until his very last day to overcome what happened to him in any way possible, and also learned in the process what he could do for people beyond just playing a superhero on screen. The movie also focuses a lot of attention on Christopher Reeve's friendship with Robin Williams. They were roommates at Juilliard. They were old friends. And again, unfortunately, we can't hear Robin Williams say this for himself, but we hear from so many other people that he was important to boosting Christopher Reeve's spirit, that he would throw a party every year on the day of the accident, the anniversary of the accident, to keep it from being a negative day. And we know now, sadly, tragically, that Robin Williams was battling his own demons for much of his life. But that's what I like about documentaries like this. The whole Robin Williams, Christopher Reeve roommates thing, before this, for me at least, was kind of an IMDb trivia thing. Like, oh, did you know that they were good friends and they were roommates in Juilliard? But seeing this documentary, you really do understand what true lifelong friendship is. It is something where you are devoted to that person, even though their life may change radically. Things about them may change radically. It is somebody that you are bonded with to the core of that person, and they're bonded to you the same way. And it's something that you're very lucky to have. I have it with a person in my life. I've had a best friend since I was 12 years old, and I feel the same way. Things have changed about me, things have changed about him over the years, but we share that connection in a way that really can't be severed. And to see that through these very familiar names, I thought was really interesting, because it's not necessarily something that people know about beyond a surface level. Now, this isn't a perfect documentary. I think that because he played Superman, it does feel obligated to devote some time to his life as Superman and his background and his casting. And it's not uninteresting information, but it feels a little bit more surface level than the other stuff that we're getting, which includes family videos and archival footage from Reeve himself. I think some of it is recorded lines from his autobiography, and learning about that family, learning about his relationship with his wife, Dana, who just immediately stepped into this role of wanting the best for her husband and really rearranged her life to help to take care of him. I think that's where the power of the story lies. The stuff about Christopher Reeve's career and stuff is fine, but I think the documentary kind of knew what it had there, because it really includes what it's obligated to, and then focuses mostly on the post-accident Christopher Reeve and his process and his journey. But that information is also somewhat essential, because especially if you're not that familiar with Christopher Reeve, I think you do need to know how people initially saw him, which was as this superhero who was invincible and couldn't be killed and all of this stuff, couldn't be hurt. And then how I think the world saw him after his accident, which was also as a superhero, but a superhero because he was mortal, because he could be hurt. And the heroics were in what he did afterward. He gave it his all against seemingly impossible odds, and he fought not just for himself, but for others, for the betterment of others, and for a better future for others. And really, isn't that what the character of Superman did and keeps doing and has done for so many years? There seems to have been some kind of fate around Christopher Reeve being cast as Superman. He was just perfect for that part. He's still my favorite movie Superman, but his life grew so much beyond that. And I think that he means so much more to people because of that. He certainly means a lot to me and has meant a lot to me, and his own meaning to me has changed. I grew up with him as this superhero in the movies, and then as I was going into my adolescence and into my teen years, he became somebody to look up to, not just for who he played, but for who he was. And he is somebody that I admire very much. And I'll admit, I've said on the channel before, when I'm reviewing something that I have a strong emotional attachment to, I'll talk about that strong emotional attachment. I have a very strong emotional attachment to Christopher Reeve, and I have a very strong emotional attachment to his time as Superman and to his portrayal of that character, and also to his life and what he did with it. And I think that he is an inspiration, because he could so easily have given up and just retreated and faded away and lived his life after this horrible accident in a way that made people feel sorry for him. But that's not what he wanted. He wanted to overcome. He wanted to inspire. He wanted to make things better. And that wasn't always his mindset. And the documentary goes into that. And I think that what he did there is so much more impressive than anything that he ever did on screen. But it really does underscore that people are capable of superheroic deeds and feats and actions without superpowers. And maybe it was fate, cruel fate, but fate nonetheless, that Christopher Reeve was one of the people that showed us that in this world. So Superman, the Christopher Reeve story, is a movie that I very much liked, and I'd recommend it. It would be a see it now rating if you're a fan of Christopher Reeve like I am, but I thought that it was very, very well done. Very inspiring, very touching, very moving. And yeah, it just taps into this idea that no matter what's going on with you, and no matter what's going on with your life, that there will always be somebody looking out for you. And like I said, maybe that's a naive idea, but it's a naive idea that I don't have any problem buying into. So those are my thoughts on Superman, the Christopher Reeve story. What do you think? Are you going to try to see it in whatever form it's available next? Let me know down in the comments below. Until next time, stay safe, especially those of you in the path of the hurricane in Tallahassee and elsewhere. I will be thinking about those at Florida State and my fellow FSU alum and current students, and I'll see you then. Bye.